of us did history? Everyone did history. Yeah? I did history too. It was actually one of my most favorite subjects. I have this habit of watching historic events like the World War II, World War I. I know almost every battle that occurred and where it occurred. So same thing with Forex. It's very important that you all know the history of Forex. What happened, where it came from, how it so happened that the markets were formed. It's very important that you also have some form of knowledge regarding that. So we're just going to dive deep into some history, which will obviously shape the way you view Forex, of where it started and where it is now, and also I suppose where it is also going to go. So the end of World War II, the world was experiencing so much chaos that the major Western governments felt the need to create a system to stabilize the global economy. So we can all appreciate the after effects of war, right? Economies most likely will crash, go down. So there is a need to find a way, a common cause, to find a solution, to have a revamp, to have governments basically revamping their industries and economies. So for example, there was the Bretton Woods Accord, which was signed in 1944 in New Hampshire, USA, which had 700 representatives of the Allied nations. We all know the Allied nations, right? That's Britain, France and? United States, right? But I know, it was a terrible war. And so the objective was to find ways of improving economies which are affected by the World War II. They resolved to peg all currencies to the dollar, which means that the value of the dollar was linked to the quantity of gold. 1944, New Hampshire, USA, the government chose Mount Washington Hotel as a site for gathering of representatives from 44 different countries. This was to be the famed Bretton Woods Monetary Conference. The conference established the World Bank, as we know today, and set the gold standard to $35 an ounce. And they chose the American dollar as the backbone of international exchange. The outcomes of the conference, they agreed to form multilateral organizations, some of which are still there today. For example, the World Trade Organization. You've got the IMF, International Monetary Fund, which, how many of us knew that the World Trade Organization used to have had a different name back in the day? So a lot of hands up when I was asking about who likes and who did history. They introduced the gold standard currency, which refers to a currency with gold as its underlying value. The system led to the adoption of the gold standard currency as the world monetary system. So gold stocks, in other words, the quantity of gold, determined the amount of the country's currency in circulation. So what does this mean, basically? Whoever has the most gold has money, right? So it's the same thing. Whoever has oil basically is the richest in the sense of today's industries, right? So in a way, you would have the people mostly interested in this particular organization or this particular system were the people who had mining claims, the countries which had mining claims, and countries which naturally had gold as one of its resources in that particular country. In this particular situation, you would have pros and cons. Yes? Yeah? Let's start with the pros, advantages. surely helps control or stabilize inflation, right? We all know inflation. Yeah? It's a good and a bad thing. You do know, yeah? It's a good and a bad thing if it's controlled. Controls? Inflation. What else do you have? Coming out of World War II, a lot of countries would need a situation where you would have everyone has to use a stable currency. Yes? So money doesn't lose its value beyond the amount of? Do you have a bad handwriting? It's a good one. It's okay. Wow. What's the third one? Government cannot inflate debt, right? Governments cannot inflate. Cons, which is your disadvantages. What's the biggest disadvantage? It's a finite resource. Yes? So if you were to mine a copious amount in a short period of time, you end up running out of the mineral, right? So gold is a finite resource. So in a way, it was not the most long-term plan. It wasn't the best long-term plan, right? It was a finite resource. So let's take, for example, Australia or South Africa, because these are huge mining economies, right? The economies are basically dictated by the supply of gold. So, for example, if South Africa was exporting, or rather mining, 100 tons per month, right? Consistently and constantly. That would help this particular system because the supply will basically match the demand. Yes? At some point in time, because of, one reason or another, one of them also because of the fact that gold is a finite resource, the supply may not be consistent and constant forever, which means that at some point in time, there's going to be a situation where the demand is going to be more than the supply. What happens in that situation? If the demand is higher than the supply, the price, it increases, right? Is higher than supply. Forces the price of gold so the situation they were looking for was to be able to maintain the price of gold at a very stable price for a long period of time. Remember, it was $35 an ounce at the beginning. So if the demand exceeds the supply, the price ends up going high, leading to inflation. For example, for a country or any form of organization, yes, I see a country as a company or an organization with different departments. The departments in a company are represented by, let's say, ministries in a government. So what happens was, what then happens is if gold becomes the most important thing, gold exploration now becomes the country's #1 priority, which means that a lot of funds or a lot of energy and effort is diverted from the other industries and is just, exactly, it's just then transferred to just the one department. And a company or a country in that sense cannot run. So that became another one of the problems. All resources were shifted to mining exploration. In your own understanding of this, was this system sustainable? It wasn't. It wasn't sustainable, right? Because of these major disadvantages or the cons of this system. So eventually, it was brought to an end. So eventually, because this system was unsustainable, countries didn't have enough gold to cover for the demand, right? So it meant the price of gold would just continue going up and up. The situation that then happens is, so you've got one currency, which is the currency that is used by all these countries, yes? And that is pegged. So in gold, the price of gold is pegged to the value of the dollar. So if the price of gold then goes up, it means that whoever is in charge of printing the US dollar now has to keep up with this demand, which means that they have to print more money, which leads to inflation. So it was definitely not sustainable. So it had to come to an end eventually. So, questions. What did we learn from this? History in a way, finds a way to occur the same way over and over again under similar. We, in a way, can feel this particular system happening over and over again, yes? So I guess we're lucky enough to have experienced this twice, fortunately. So any questions? All understood? So it's very important that, everybody gets a sense of, this particular system to kind of get an idea of trading, why this happened. Because like you saw at the introduction of this chapter, you saw the organizations that were also formed. World Trade Organization, and you also have the International Monetary Fund. Exactly. So and these are all in a way connected to our industry. Yes? All right, so let's just take a break.